welcome to an Everyday Canines video. In this episode on running contacts, I want to talk to you about the importance of speed or drive. Speed and drive are essentially the same thing, but people tend to think of them as differently. Drive, if we look at it more closely, is the desire to go as fast as possible over a straight, over a jump, over a running contact. So while speed on its own is the speed your dog is going, the drive is that desire to go as fast as possible. Why is that important? Okay, the faster my dog goes over the contact, two things will happen. They will either produce a really beautiful deep hit, that's swift, because they're going so fast, they power into that hit and they get all 4 feet there. Or if they're Sparrow, they might be driving so fast that they get all their feet muddled up down here and they miss the contact. So that is why speed becomes important thinking with your dog, because we can teach our dog to go at a certain speed over the dog walk. And once that speed is set, it's set. And it can be very frustrating to try and change. What do I mean by that? You may have seen, and you may have done it yourself, people who, because they want that contact and because their dog keeps missing it, they teach the dog to creep down the dog walk. So the dog runs, it gets here and it starts to slow down to a creep, gets here and goes. Most of the time, these dogs are actually still not aware of where their contact area is. You can see it so often, they creep down, they get here, they jump off. So it's not that they understand the criteria any better and they're slowing down to get the criteria. They've actually learnt from the handler saying, slow down to get that contact. What they're learning is that they have to go slowly down here, but they haven't actually learned about this area, they haven't learned to run. I had that with Merlin. He would run, and he would get here and he would slow right down. It was an ongoing battle with him with running contacts on the dog walk. His A-frame is beautiful, but I never could quite master the dog walk with him. And what I found was that if he went a bit faster, he would miss the contact because he would leap. If he went slow, yes, he would usually get at least 1 foot in it, but obviously it was slow. And this is when I started to realise there was a bigger picture to running contacts than just one aspect. That's why I started to look at the whole picture rather than just one thing like stride, like where they're hitting with their feet, whatever. So speed is a very important factor and drive is an important factor. It comes in a lot of different forms. So let's talk about Swift. Swift tends to be a little bit more laid back in my training field. It's a happy place for her. She's relaxed, she's cool. That means that sometimes when I'm doing running contacts, I can get beautiful hits, but she's not going at her full speed. She's not going at that driven level. Which means when I get into competition and she's that little bit higher because it's an exciting environment, there's lots going on, she's a bit up there, she runs faster and we miss. So I had to work on this. I had to say, right, I need the sort of drive I get in a competition in training so I can proof my contacts. And that is why with my contacts I have to, when I run them, I really run at them, I shout go, and I try and build her up as much as possible. I've done lots of stuff, had other people help me, so I can get what I have in training at competition or vice versa. And that's something you see quite often. You see dogs that, because they're relaxed in training, they do some beautiful contacts. As soon as they get into competition, they're a little bit higher, a little bit more excited. That's when they start to miss. So in that situation, in a training environment, you need to increase the speed as much as possible to really get them powering as hard as possible. So you can proof that for competition. The flip side is the dog that needs to have a little bit more control on the down plank, and that is Sparrow. So with Sparrow, I am now looking at just asking her to slow herself a fraction for this contact. I'm not asking her to creep, absolutely not. I just want a fraction slower as she's going down so she can make that contact area. If she's going out her full pelt, she'll miss. If she just slows a fraction, we're not talking a lot, we're still moving, but we're just not quite in that full out gallop, perhaps more of a canter, she can get that contact. And that's a tough one. That's actually harder to create then the dog that you need the extra drive from to get that slightly controlled on that contact is actually quite challenging. But that's the only way I can achieve things with Sparrow, because Sparrow doesn't have that level of consistency that Swift does, and so we have to look at things slightly differently. Sparrow doesn't have much of a clue where all her legs are. Proprioception is horrible. So that is just something we have to understand and appreciate. So sometimes we want the dogs to go as fast as possible over a contact because that's the way they're going to get beautiful deep contact, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we want our dog to just put in a fraction of control. It's a little bit like when they're hitting the weave entry. When you're teaching weaves, you want your dog to power through the weaves as fast as possible, but they need to understand the element of control and slowing to make the first entry, especially when it's a tight turn. So it's just that little element of self-awareness. But we're not talking a creep, we're not talking a slow pace down. It's just something different. All these things come together with your stride, with top line, with looking at where feet hit. You know, it becomes this picture that you're looking at to say, right, I know what happens when these boxes get ticked, I know that this will happen. And you have to get that idea into your head, and that becomes quite a feat if you're not using video. When you're using video, you can look back and you look at the runs that went well, and you say, what did I do there that went well? What did my dog do? What was my dog doing that went really well? And then you look at the runs that went wrong, say, what was the difference? And that's when you start to pick up this varied idea of what your dog is achieving, what your dog needs to do to hit this running contact. Now, speed-wise, I'm talking here about the dog walk. The dog walk, I want my dog to power across as smoothly and fast as possible with an element of self-control if you're Sparrow. In fact, all dogs will need an element of self-control if they understand their criteria, because they will be concentrating on making sure they get that contact. When we move on to the A-frame, which we'll do in the next couple of videos, I want something slightly different. I don't necessarily want my dog throwing itself over at full speed, because that can be hazardous. So this is very much a case of understanding your contact equipment and where speed is good and where you want them to think. It is something, a lot of this all becomes a big thing that you've got to think about with running contacts, and I appreciate it's quite hard, and obviously if you're doing stopped contacts this becomes a lot easier. But when you get it right, and once you get that understanding, it will all make sense, and it does become this thing that you can work with and create beautiful running contacts. So I hope that element of speed and drive has made sense to you, and also when you need control versus that just all out speed. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, you might like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon.